Welcome to Books and Booze, a bookish and wine and juice podcast. Whether you're a fan of books, wine, or true crime, this is the place for you. Pour yourself a glass of whatever you enjoy and enjoy the show. Cheers!
Today I'm joined on Books and Booze by my very good friend, Mr. Dave Horrocks.
Why, thank you for that introduction. So, it is a bit strange, I have to say, because I'm normally introduced by someone from Manchester who's a big Manchester United fan.
Well,
who swears like a sailor and calls me a see you next Tuesday. But today it's not Chris, so I'm
everything
delighted to be
else
here.
Besides that
Yeah, but everything is exactly the same.
And we're also joined by his lovely pooch, Tasha, who is a Yorkie/Chihuahua.
Yeah, she's a chalky.
And she's pretty much just sat on my face for the last couple of days.
No comment.
So I decided, for those of you that don't know, I released an episode a few days ago where I'd moved to Spain, everything was going great-ish. Ended up deciding that, fuck that, and moved to England before the coronavirus outbreak decided to strand me in Spain. This place called Bedford, in Bedfordshire, to research whether there was any cool true crime cases around. And it turned out that in 2014, Bedfordshire was the murder capital of Britain.
So to be fair, I thought this was the safest place around.
It really
always
seems
felt
like it.
really cool just walking around, and now you've scared the shit out of me.
Well, that's what wine's for.
Well, yep. Yeah.
Cheers.
Cheers.
What are we drinking tonight, Dave?
So we are drinking a 2019 Shiraz, and it has no sulphur or preservatives added.
Which means no hangover.
Hooray!
It's also vegan.
Hooray!
I'm day 4 of veganism now, and I just had my first vegan pizza. It was great.
To be fair, there's not many people who've uttered that sentence before. And, so I've been vegan for kind of over a year now, but yeah, cheese is not one of the things that vegans do great. So I kind of enjoy the original pizzas, but I'm glad you liked it.
Thank you. I'm glad you introduced me to it. Okay, so while researching all this true crime stuff, as the true crime sleuth that I am, I discovered this case about James Hanratty, who is also better known as the A6 murderer. So I'm going to get into the case. It was August 1961.
You're not supposed to say something witty there. I'm feeling too much pressure here.
In Bedfordshire. Long sunny summer days were slowly coming to an end. The temperature was starting to drop like the leaves from the trees. 36-year-old scientist Michael Gregston was in his car, parked in a cornfield at Darney Reach. Do you know where Darney Reach is?
No idea.
Right, you've only lived here for a year. Anyway, it's a stunning English village bordering the River Thames in Buckinghamshire.
Oh, right, okay, yeah.
Okay. He was accompanied in his car by his mistress at the time, Valerie Story. They were in their car in this cornfield, and this man, who was dressed in an expensive-looking suit, tapped on their car window, and Gregston wound the window down, and as he did so, he had a revolver shoved in his face. And this man, whoever he was, said, "This is a hold-up. I'm a desperate man. I have been on the run for 4 months. If you do as I tell you, you'll be all right."
That sounds like the worst written bit of dialogue out of a shit movie. I mean...
It does.
Is it wrong that I'm just thinking like a Carry-On movie?
So let me tell you a little bit more about Valerie Story and Michael Gregston. She was his mistress, so they've been having an affair for quite a while. They met at work. So he's a scientist, and they worked at this road research laboratory in Slough.
Slough, okay.
Is that
that's quite... Yeah, that's where David Brent's from.
Oh, right.
In The Office.
Okay.
Yeah, they've got a paper factory in Slough. Yeah. Nowhere near here.
Okay, so that's where they worked, and Valerie Story was an assistant at the lab. So that's how their affair all began. So now this man has gotten into the back seat, and he's commanded that they drive further into the cornfield. So he then made them stop, and for 2 long hours, this guy continuously chatted to them as he held them up with the gun against their head. So for 2 hours straight, he was just chattering, just nonsensically, basically, to this couple that were like shitting bricks.
Yeah.
Right. So then, come midnight, he decided that he really wanted to get some food and cigarettes, and Gregson had to start up the engine. He told the gunman that he could have all the money in his pocket and keep the car if he let them go, but this guy just ignored his pleas. So just after 1 o'clock in the morning, the man told the couple that he wanted to go to sleep. They once again pulled over. The man decided to tie Valerie Story's hands behind her back with Gregson's tie. Once she was dealt with, the man asked Gregson to pass him a bag that he'd spotted in the car. As Gregson reached for the bag, 2 gunshots were fired. The man had put 2 bullets into Gregson's skull, killing him instantly. Valerie Story screamed at this point in horror and wanted to find out what the fuck he'd done, because all her man had done was do exactly what he was told. So this murderer said that he'd gotten a fright at how quickly he'd moved. He then asked Valerie Story to kiss him, but Valerie at this stage had struggled free from the tie that she'd been tied with, and she tried really hard to disarm him, but he was too strong for her. So he forced her into the back seat and demanded that she remove her clothing, and then he raped her. When he was finished, he told her to drag Gregson's body from the car, and once she was at the car, she basically sat down beside Gregson's lifeless body and started sobbing. This dude, who she didn't know who he was at this stage, just came up to her, and she dug a £1 note from her pocket and told him to take it and take the car and just please leave her alone. And it seemed like he was going to listen to her and let her off free, but he turned towards the car, but at the last second he turned back, stared at her for a few seconds, and then shot her. He shot at her 7 times, and she collapsed onto the ground. She pretended to be dead. 2 of these gunshots were actually right in her head, but she was somehow still alive. So she lay there frozen for as long as she could, and eventually she'd satisfied him that she was dead. So he drove off in their car towards Luton, but he was a really bad driver apparently. He couldn't drive at all.
Well, he's also a really bad shot. He shot her 7 times and he only hit her twice.
Well,
it's like a fucking stormtrooper.
She had quite a number of bullet wounds. There'd been 2 in the head with a revolver, and also she had gunshots in her left shoulder and neck. And the wounds had actually left her paralysed from below the shoulders.
We'll be right back after this quick break. I don't understand. Everything I did for her. When Regan Penn discovers that a long-term boyfriend has been cheating on her with over 8 women, she packs her bags and leaves the sunny island in Spain that she had called home for over a year. She returns to South Africa, where she is given the chance to start over in life, reassemble herself. Now is her time to be selfish, find a new career, get a home of her own, become whoever she wants to be. But when her best friend, Peyton, is brutally murdered, Regan is forced to put her life on hold to take responsibility for her friend's 13-year-old daughter, Harley. As the police battle to solve the murder of Peyton and her unborn child, Regan becomes convinced that her godchild is not the sweet, innocent little girl everyone seems to think that she is. Could Harley have been so consumed by her jealousy and fear of not being the epicenter of her mother's universe that it led to murder? If so, is Regan safe in her own home? It Was You by Jade Lee Wright, the host of Books and Booze, is available to purchase on Amazon in both paperback or Kindle form.
Once this guy had gone, she lost consciousness trying to wave down motorists who were driving by. So the next morning, the sun was starting to rise, and this Oxford undergraduate who was conducting a traffic census discovered the body of Michael, realised he'd obviously been shot dead, and he noticed next to him that Valerie Story was semi-conscious, still alive, but had loads of gunshot wounds. So he quickly arranged for an ambulance to arrive on the scene. So, obviously then, things started to escalate with this case, and the revolver that had been used to shoot the couple was found about 24 hours later, and it had been slipped under a seat in a bus. It was fully loaded, but no fingerprints were found, so it had been wiped clean.
Mm-hmm.
Which is good thinking.
Standard.
Yeah. But also, there was a handkerchief that had been found with the gun. But unfortunately, back in those days, they didn't have the technology to test for DNA and stuff.
Yeah.
But they put the cloth into evidence, and that was kept away for many, many years.
So wasn't it in the 60s that they discovered DNA? So it was, I'm sure it was in the 60s they discovered DNA, and it was only years and years. It's like,
It was in the 90s, I think, that technology started to advance.
yeah, but I think it was in Cambridge. It's like close to here where they discovered it all.
Oh, interesting.
Mm.
Yeah, this is why you're on here. An investigation into this case was launched. A manager from a close-by hotel came forward to the police saying that this man had checked into the hotel right after the murders had taken place, and he'd actually locked himself into his room for over 5 days straight and hadn't come out at all. So he was already pretty suspicious. So the police immediately swung past the hotel and picked the man up. And the man had originally introduced himself as this dude called Frederick Durant, but the police quickly found out that his true identity was Peter Alphon. So already a bit suspicious with giving a different name.
And did you just say identity?
Did I say identity?
I think
I
you
said
did.
identity.
No, I think that's what you tried to say.
Did I really say that?
I don't know. I think the recording will tell us. But I'm pretty sure you said identity. But
Wow.
I might be wrong. Either your mouth is drunk or my ear's drunk. And I'm not that confident on either.
No, there's been a lot of wine involved in these evenings we've spent together, but also it doesn't really matter. We're having fun, and it's Corona lockdown virus, so fuck everyone. Identity. I'm gonna make that word up.
Yeah, I like it.
So, this Peter Alphon, they looked into him, and they discovered that he was this drifter, so he never stayed in one place for too long, and he was living off of an inheritance and kind of like whatever he made from gambling and stuff. Unfortunately, with his questioning, he had a solid alibi for the night of the crime in question. He'd said that he was with his mother the night of the murder, and the evening after he was staying at this hotel called the Vienna Hotel. So he got released. At this time, Valerie Story and another eyewitness had detailed the appearance of the killer to this artist who sketched a facial composite of the unknown man. So there was already a kind of an idea about what this guy looked like. Time went on with hardly any progress until the 11th of September, when 2 cartridge cases were found in a bedroom at the Vienna Hotel, which is where Alphon had been staying the evening of the murder.
Mm.
The cartridge cases were matched with the bullets that killed Michael Gregson. So already you think, well, it's a no-brainer.
Yeah.
But the manager of the hotel was able to pull up the name of the guest who had been staying in that exact room, and it wasn't Alphon, it was a guy called James Ryan.
Right.
Right? So this is where your mind might get a bit fucked. because when I was researching this case, I was like, what? I had to read it through about 3 or 4 times to understand everything. So take this part slowly and tell me to slow down if you need it. Right? So.
Slow down.
So, the manager was questioned about both Alphon and James Ryan staying in the hotel. At first, the manager said that Alphon had been staying in room 6 and hadn't left the room all night. But his story changed at his next interrogation. He later claimed that it had been Ryan in room 6, not Alphon, and that the men had swapped rooms for reasons unknown during the night. Just a few days before the discovery of the cartridges in the hotel room, a woman was attacked in her home in Richmond by a man who identified himself to her as the A6 murderer. During an identity parade, this woman who was attacked picked Alphon out from all the men in the group, and she was completely confident that he was the one who attacked her.
Mm-hmm.
Right, so everything kind of leans towards Alphon at this point. The police made the bold move of naming Alphon the murder suspect. But even though they put him through this intense interrogation process, there was another identity parade which was set up for Valerie Story, who had obviously been raped and attacked by this guy, and she didn't recognise him at all. So he was eventually released after being detained for the attack in Richmond. The police were nowhere closer to finding their murder suspect, so the police went back to the hotel manager, which seemed at this point to be their only kind of link. This time, he admitted that the second statement that he'd given had been a lie. He said that he'd known Alphon was a prime suspect and he wanted to help their case.
So why would he do that? What was his motive there?
So apparently this hotel manager had quite a lot of his own criminal history as well. It's not a major part of the story, but, you know, it's there. But I think he obviously thought he had the killer and wanted to lead them in the right direction, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough, isn't it? I mean, without sort of DNA evidence, and obviously it's all paper records, and it must be so difficult. How the fuck did they solve any crimes back then?
It's difficult, like, before the technology advancements and stuff. It kind of just has to go down to what the jury believed.
Yeah.
The investigation then continued, and this time it focused more on this other suspect called Mr. James Ryan, who had also been staying at the Vienna Hotel. Ryan turned out to actually be another false name. His real name was James Hanratty. Right?
Okay.
He was 25, a burglar with 4 convictions, and it turned out that in his paranoia, he'd actually called up Scotland Yard a number of times to say that he had absolutely nothing to do with the A6 murderer case. He said that he'd fled the hotel and been in hiding ever since because he couldn't provide a solid alibi for the night of the murder.
Mm-hmm.
The police were then able to track him down, and they arrested him in Blackpool in mid-October. A few days later, he was put into an identity parade where Valerie Story easily picked him out, especially after hearing him speak. The night that this horrible event happened, she remembered that the murderer had this really distinctive Cockney accent, and he pronounced think as think.
Yeah.
Right? Hanratty was then charged with the murder of Michael Gregson. The murder trial began in January 1962 in Bedford, 9 miles from the murder scene.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. The trial lasted 21 days, which at the time was the longest lasting trial in English history.
Oh, wow.
Eventually, the jury reached a unanimous verdict of guilty, and Hanratty's appeal was dismissed in mid-March. And although 90,000 people signed a petition, Hanratty was executed in Bedford on the 4th of April 1962.
That is a lot. I mean, there's no Twitter, there's no social media, 90,000 people.
Do you think even that many people live in Bedford?
Not a chance.
Yeah.
There has got to be a few counterfeit signatures there. 90,000.
Before he was hanged, Hanratty still insisted that he was innocent. So at this point, you'd expect that this is where the case would be over. But even though you think justice would have been served, this is not the case. An A6 defence committee started up, which was actually partly funded by John Lennon.
Oh, wow.
Yeah?
Oh, my man. Look at John Lennon.
The people on the committee were absolutely adamant that Hanratty was innocent and Alphon was the actual murderer. Which, I mean, obviously it was too late, like, this dude was fucking dead. But they weren't without their reasons. Not only did Alphon resemble the sketch artist's drawing from the now paraplegic Valerie Story's description of him more than James Hanratty did, but people stated that Alphon was also really stressed, and when he was stressed, his accent would lapse into Cockney, which sounded very much like how Valerie Story heard this James Hanratty speak with the think instead of think.
I mean, to be honest, they do talk. It's not Cockney, but
can you put it on
around here? You have a bit of Luton. People talk like a bit of Luton, and they sound a bit like Cockneys, but they're not Cockneys. It's right, proper Luton. That's probably as good as it's going to get.
Okay. More evidence was that Alphon was a really terrible driver, which Valerie Story had noted about the murderer during their attack. In the attack, it had almost seemed very likely that the murderer had never even driven a car before. But James Hanratty was an experienced car thief, so he obviously knew how to drive very well. There was also a substantial amount of money paid into Alphon's account during the time of this murder. Alphon was then questioned again, and eventually he told the police that someone had paid him £5,000 to end the affair between Gregson and Story.
Mm-hmm.
And now at this stage, with this confession, James Hanratty was already dead. He'd been executed.
Yeah.
Right? Alphon confessed that he had gotten a gun and hijacked the couple. He said that he'd given Gregson 2 chances to get away. And I quote, "Each time, the bloody man kept coming back." Now, I'm not 100% sure exactly what happened with Alphon's confession, because many years later, in 2009, Alphon died from a fall at his family home, and that clearly means he wasn't sentenced and he wasn't in jail. I'm not really sure what happened there after he confessed. But close friends recounted that Alphon had always talked about the A6 murder case obsessively, and he'd often incriminated himself in the case. With all that was going on, throughout all of this, Hanratty's family was continuing to pursue his innocence. So, what the hell is the truth? Well, as you might know, technology advancements were made in the 90s, and evidence from the crime, such as the handkerchief found at with the gun and Valerie's knickers from her rape, were tested for DNA. The Hanratty family willingly gave their DNA, helping the case and hoping that it would finally give James Hanratty a clear name. But unfortunately, that was far from the truth for them. The DNA turned out to be 2.5 million times more likely to belong to James Hanratty than to anyone else.
It's quite conclusive, to be fair.
Yeah. So after that, they decided, because they carried on saying that, well, no, it's not true, you need to do more, they decided that they had to exhume Hanratty's body from his grave to get his complete, exact evidence of DNA. And it was compared to the semen found on Valerie Story's knickers and the mucus found on the handkerchief, and it turned out to be an exact match. A statement was made that James Hanratty was guilty beyond any doubt. To this day, a lot of Hanratty supporters still contest this conclusion, but Valerie Story, before her death in 2016, said, I identified the guilty man. I looked into his eyes, and he looked into mine. I knew who he was, and he knew that I recognised him. I found the guilty person.
So, hold on. Let me make sure I've understood this correctly.
Yeah.
So she identified Alphon.
No. She Valerie Story identified James Hanratty as the murderer. It was the other girl that had gotten attacked in Richmond.
Right.
Who had identified
She identified Alphon. Right. Okay.
Yeah.
So it was him, wasn't it?
But that makes you wonder. So there's a lot of controversy around the DNA and saying that it could have been contaminated or planted, but it makes you think, why was Alphon so insistent that he had something to do with this murder if he had absolutely nothing to do with it?
It is strange, isn't it? But I mean, so in the 60s, obviously mental health wasn't even a thought. So Alphon, I'm assuming, is short for Alfonso.
Mm.
So Bedford is the biggest population of Italian immigrants.
Oh, you did say that.
Yeah, in England. So obviously he's Italian descent. A lot of them came along after the Second World War as part of the whole rebuilding Britain sort of effort.
And you did say that they all had Cockney accents.
They did, yeah. So and again, so if I, especially if you go down the pub, you meet a lot of people who identify themselves as Italian, but they sound proper Cockney, And I just, when you were saying about the accents, I'm just wondering, how much of that, and I'm just making it up as I go along here because I don't actually know, but you would think if you were a massive population like that, you must have suffered quite a lot of kind of prejudice and racism. So you would probably, even though they're identified as Italian, they'll probably go above and beyond trying to fit in, with the accents and everything.
No, that's true.
So, but that doesn't explain why you would want to put yourself forward for an actual rape and murder.
It's weird, and the fact that his friends, after this man had died in his old age in his home after a fall, said that he obsessively talked about the case and incriminated himself many years later.
I mean, could it be that he was some sort of accomplice, or
That's what
he was
I'm
a confidant?
Because they were both at the same hotel the night of the murder. Yeah. Then there's a hotel manager saying they swapped rooms during the night. They both had false identities. I don't really understand why there's not more research done into the relationship between the two of them.
Yeah. There's clearly something, isn't there?
There must be.
There's clearly a relationship there.
Yeah. The one thing I had forgotten to mention, actually, about this case, which I kind of found a bit ironic, was where they wound up on the A6 was this place called Deadman's Hill, near Clop Hill in Bedfordshire.
All right, okay.
Do you know where Clop Hill is?
Nope.
No? You're a really terrible
I'm terrible, yeah. Obviously, you can tell from the accent I'm not actually from around here, but what I will tell you about the A6 is if you're driving up, you go past a place called the Vanilla Alternative, and I just kind of thought that was a little rundown place. Nah, it's not. No.
Well,
so as a reader of a certain book, I'm pretty sure you probably know what I'm on about. But someone told me it was a different sort of place.
I think he's talking about 50 Shades of Grey.
I am.
Oh, not just a pretty face. Cheers.
I've thrown you off your game there, haven't I?
Well, yeah, you're making a sexual comment. I'm just trying to get back in it. Right, yeah, so that's my case.
So the way you started this off, it was like Dr. Zeus, and this is the worst fucking Dr. Zeus story I've ever heard.
But you say that about all my true crime cases. Yeah, this one was supposed to be funny, and now it's like there's 8-year-olds getting shot in the head. What the fuck?
So my kind of stories are more like, mum and dad get killed in an alleyway. The son goes on to become Batman. Those are my true crime stories.
Yeah, because you're a Marvel nerd.
DC, that one. That was a Batman thing, but
Well,
these are just hugely depressing. And you know what can't resonate with me with true crime is like this, where it's like there's all these open-ended questions. I'm like, but which is it? I need to know. And
yeah.
I'm like, no, tell me the answer.
Well, so it depends on what you think. There's so many people that think to this day that James Hanratty is innocent, despite the DNA evidence, because DNA evidence can be contaminated, and it could be fake. And it was also the DNA evidence was all done in a private room. It wasn't a public thing.
Yeah.
So whatever was stated afterwards, you've got to trust whoever was in that room.
So the problem is, if it's today, you go into a crime scene and, the police and everything are educated to know not to contaminate the crime scene.
Mm.
Now, in the 60s, there's no concept of that. So like I say, I'm pretty sure my memory in its drunken haze is kind of not quite sure, but I'm sure DNA was discovered in the 60s, but it never became admissible in court and used in crime cases until the kind of 90s and onwards. So, and then it sort of, you have landmark cases, and then it's used, and then, it circles back and it influences behaviour. So you can't really trust any kind of DNA evidence that it's not contaminated, I don't think.
Yeah, but also, so this one specifically was, I think, only the DNA evidence from the exhumed body of James Hanratty, and the knickers and the handkerchief and stuff. That was only in the 90s. So that contamination, it's like, I don't know, it's like purely whatever you think. It was done in a private room. It wasn't public.
Yeah.
They could have been trying to cover something up, or it could have just been to protect privacy of the family. I don't really understand why they wouldn't have done it in public to show it to the world straight away. I think that would have been the best thing to have done, but turned out that James Hanratty was one of the final people to be executed in the UK before capital punishment became an end.
So obviously if he was innocent, and that is a problem with capital punishment, full stop, isn't it? If there is a 0.0001% chance that someone is innocent, then should you fire a gun and end that person's life? And a lot of people now, a lot of fascist thinkers think, well, no, if I'm 51% sure, they should die. But you can't turn the clock back on that, can you? So, it does sound pretty conclusive, to be honest. Like, say, there's a risk of contamination, but what was it, 2,500?
2.5 million.
Oh, two, yeah.
I think percent chance of it being James Hanratty.
Yeah.
But
why as well would his supporters be so adamant? What knowledge do they have that he is so innocent?
He'd also, I'm not sure how validated this is, but upon researching this case, I went onto YouTube to see if there was anything about it as well. I got most of my facts from Wikipedia, but I went onto YouTube and there was apparently this letter that Hanratty had written to his younger brother, who was also called Michael, the day before he was executed. And it was all about how his younger brother's now going to be the oldest in the family, but he said stuff like, he's so lucky to have parents that they've got. They'll never get parents like that. But he said stuff like how he mustn't believe all these horrible things they're going to say about him, and don't let people say bad things against me. Basically, almost like very manipulative to say, I am not the murderer, and you need to make them believe that.
So,
and that's horrible. Imagine as a sibling to have to go through that. If it's not true, then yeah, obviously you'd want, like, if my brother was framed for murder, I'd want to do the same thing, like fight for his innocence. But
so there's a brilliant book. I mean, unfortunately, there's so many self-help books now. It's just hard to see the wood from the trees. But one of the things I love is How to Make Friends and Influence People.
I've read that actually.
And one of the opening stories is about a guy who basically shoots and kills some people in cold blood, but then will absolutely go on to deny it point blank. And the moral of the story being that people will make excuses for their own behaviour. So the fact that he's writing a story and saying, writing a letter and saying, don't believe everything, it says absolutely nothing to me about his innocence.
It's just a bizarre case when you've got this person that's like coming forward and saying they are the murderer, then he's not clearly convicted of it. This other guy's been executed. His family's going through fucking all sorts of emotions. You just don't know what to believe.
So
John Lennon's fucking somehow in there.
Yeah, but I mean, John Lennon's very much, kind of that socialist person. I can believe him sort of getting behind a narrative, getting behind a cause. But I mean, so you've researched lots of these cases. I mean, what would your hypothesis be there's clearly a relationship between him and Alphon.
I agree.
So something's going on there. Now, is Alphon just maybe a bit simple? Is he susceptible and he's sort of set him up or maybe convinced him? There's something going on there that's not explored.
I definitely feel like there's a relationship that's gone on between James Hanratty and this Alphon guy. But the fact that there's this evidence about this DNA that is 2,000,000% chance of being James Hanratty from the semen and the mucus found on the handkerchief and the knickers. How can you not think that that's it? But then you think again about the fact that it's been done behind closed doors. Why was it done behind closed doors? There's so many questions with this case that you're just like, how could you ever come to a full conclusion and be confident in what you're saying? What do you think? If you had to choose now, one or the other, Alphon or Hanratty, which one do you think did it?
I mean, I'd go with the scientific evidence, which is Hanratty. But I mean, unfortunately, the law talks about unreasonable doubt, doesn't it? Yeah. And unfortunately, I'm a kind of analytical person, and I don't ever believe in absolutes. So there's always, the door's always open to the other option, which doesn't ever help you with closure. So I don't know. I'd go with the DNA, but again, is it him operating on his own, or there's something going on with Alphon there?
Yeah.
But what is the motive?
I felt the whole time I was reading about this case, when I realised there were two dudes definitely kind of suspects. I was like, they've got to be linked somehow.
Yeah.
It's too similar not to. Both given false identities, both staying at the same hotel.
Yeah.
Apparently, manager saying that they switched hotel rooms during the night for no reason, even though he then claimed that it was a false statement because he wanted Alphon to be arrested. I don't know. It's far too much.
Yeah, I mean, you can't really trust any of those statements, can you? Especially when someone says, "Oh, the first statement I gave was bollocks. This one is true." Well, it's like, well, if you're saying the first one it's like a Star Trek logical conundrum, isn't it? The first one was false.
How can you bring Star Trek
onto
the books and booze?
There was an episode, the original series, where it was like, oh, if I'm always lying, or I can't quite remember the scene, but it's a logical conundrum. So you're saying the time previous I was lying, but now I'm telling the truth. Well, so immediately that puts you into a circular argument of, well, you're unreliable. So is the first one the truth, or is the second one the truth? Because you've already admitted you're a liar. So do I believe the first lie, or do I believe the second lie? I don't know. That's why I fucking hate true crime. I want absolutes. I want to know what happened.
That's the thing with a case like this. Like, you know, the dude's fucking dead and gone, and both of them are now dead and gone. Like, it's been taken to their graves. You'll never know the truth. Really. Like, even with the evidence.
Why is that a positive?
No, but I'm saying that's why you hate true crime.
Oh, right, okay, yeah.
Yeah, it's annoying. It's better when either you get those true crime cases where it's like you don't know, like with Madeleine McCann or something, or with a case where you know without any doubt this is the murderer.
Yeah.
Done. But you're quite fascinated with the Madeleine McCann murder.
Yeah, and again, I just think, just because alright, touche.
Yeah.
Because that is fascinating, because I want to know, but I guess I've lived through that, whereas this is like a historical kind of
in the
exploration.
town that you live in.
I know. Well, the safe town that I walk around drunk at 2:00 in the morning, or no.
Do you?
Not
We're in coronavirus, so I don't know this
always.
about you yet.
Not always. But it feels safe to me. But I mean, it was 1961. But I mean, the whole bit is weird, though, isn't it? Like the whole talking to them in the car for 2 hours that you talked about. If you're gonna kill them, just fucking kill them. Or is he? He's not an experienced killer, clearly.
Well,
maybe.
If it was James Hanratty, he'd only ever had 4 other convictions with petty theft.
Yeah. So he's a small time criminal, sort of toying with the idea of, murder, of rape and murder. But yeah, maybe that explains the 2 hours.
If he was the killer, maybe he got nervous and just in his nerves just decided to just fucking talk to them for 2 hours. Because he must have had so much adrenaline going through his body, thinking, fuck, I'm about to murder these people.
What was it you were saying about the accent slipping as well?
The Cockney accent.
Yeah.
But that was with Alphon, apparently. So, Hanratty had this proper Cockney accent, but apparently when they were interviewing Alphon about the case, when he got stressed, his voice slipped into this Cockney accent. which those who were close to him mentioned.
Mm.
So, and the fact that there was the car thing. So the night of this whole thing, when Valerie was left with the dead Michael Grenston and this guy had driven off, she'd actually had to say to him how to drive the car.
Mm.
She had to give him instructions into how to put it into gear or whatever, how to drive it. But James Hanratty was a proper car thief and knew how to drive, and this guy was apparently a really shit driver, and Alphon didn't know how to drive.
Mm.
So it's so confusing to figure it out. Like, I actually wonder if somehow both of them was involved
they're
in a
both
way.
involved. They are both involved. Just exactly. So, again, I mean, they're both dead now, but...
Thank God.
So, they are both involved, 100%.
Mm.
But exactly how is not clear. But that's the annoying thing.
And it's like you're never going to really figure it out.
Yeah.
Unless one of them kept a fucking diary.
Well, unless you could theorise a motive. Like, why would you do the whole room swap thing? And
Well, that was apparently a fake statement from the hotel manager.
yeah, but then he could be pressured. You know, he could be,
Being,
roughed up outside and say, oh, yeah, I said that. And honestly, some boys have been round and told me to fucking change my statement. So here's what I'm saying now.
Mm.
I think, to be honest, well, speculation, but I would think if you get a first statement from someone like that, where they've not got a direct relationship with the person, it's more likely to be authentic, I would have thought, without thinking about it too deeply. But I guess that is a horrendously difficult thing that police have got, isn't it? You know, you've got all of these different accounts, and at different times, they'll contradict each other. So it's like, well, how can you triangulate what is the truth?
Well, thanks very much to Tasha and Dave for coming on to my recording.
It has been lovely. It's been an education.
Your first true crime recording. Dave is actually a podcast host himself for much more pleasant things.
Yeah, I typically talk about more like things like Spider-Man and Batman and Superman and happy things like comic books on Comics in Motion, and also
girls in little bikinis and G-strings.
Oh, of course, there is the Love Island cast as well, which is kind of how we connected. And so, yeah, if you want a bit of reality TV, get over to the Love Island cast. And it's been brilliant.
What other podcasts do you have? Say, leave them all here, and I'll leave them in the.
The only other one I'd note is the VHS Strikes Back. So that's where we go back and look at kind of mainly sort of 80s and 90s movies and sort of discuss those and have a bit of a laugh about them as well. And some of them, quite honestly, things like Ghostbusters, we remember as being brilliant, and honestly, they're fucking shit.
Well, you did Back to the Future recently, which is awesome.
That is awesome, and that stands up really well. But honestly, you'd be surprised. A lot of the things that stand up in your memory do not stand up when you go back to watch.
Yeah, and also like the whole incest thing with Back to the Future, it kind of freaked me out a bit.
Yep, I'm pretty sure Marty McFly was a hair's breadth away from nailing his mum.
It's a bit much for me.
Thanks for listening to Books and Booze.
That's the kind of
You can find us on Instagram under Books Booze Podcast, or alternatively boho_bookworm.
You've also got
We're also on Twitter under Books
Comics in
Booze
Motion.
Pod.
So
We're also on Patreon if you would like to support us by donating as little as $1 a month.
Comic books and
if you're looking for a free way to support us, please leave us a 5-star review.
So,
as always,
it's been
a pleasure. Happy reading and
obviously
drink
there's
responsibly.
nothing much coming out now. So we'll be doing a lot of retro reviews of things that have come out in the past. But again, just lots of fun and lots of laughs.
I also feel like Tasha should have her own personal doggy Instagram page. I might set that up for you while I'm here.
I think you should. She's excited about it, clearly.
She's just like, "Rrr."
It's past her bedtime.
Yeah.
She's all partied out.
She's trying really hard to stay awake to hang out with us. Sitting on my face half the day.
Lucky girl.
Wow. Yeah, Davey, all you have to do is ask. Alright, well, thanks everyone. We'll talk to you next time.
Bye now.
Bye. You always say bye now.
I do. It's my crutch.
Is it?
Yeah.
Thanks for listening to Books and Booze. You can find us on Instagram under Books Booze Podcast, or alternatively, boho_bookworm. We're also on Twitter under Books Booze Pod. We're also on Patreon if you would like to support us by donating as little as $1 a month. If you're looking for a free way to support us, please leave us a 5-star review. As always, it's been a pleasure. Happy reading and drink responsibly.